Hello, hello. It's me, still recovering from surgery, Vosh, with my PNG doppelganger here. Vosh. Except it's me when I'm not recovering from surgery and also when I've just had a haircut and a beard trim. So it's actually me looking pretty fine, to be honest with you. It's 2 a.m. right now on the 18th. Oh, well, on the 19th actually, because it's the next day. And I was browsing lay Reddit before heading to bed, and I saw something that I imagine is going to be subject to quite a bit of discourse, and I wanted to add my 2 cents. So, first of all, sorry for being on lay Reddit, etc., etc. But here we go. Rockstar edits out transphobic content from GTA 5 remasters. Here, to make you feel more at home, there you go. As you can see, the auto transparency tool cut out a bit of my tank top strap there. So, you know, I'll just let me be still there in the corner so I can focus on reading the article without animating it with my mouse. But anyway, so basically, GTA 5 is being re-released for the 18th time. Great, it's a triple, quadruple, bajillion platinum game. Everyone's bought it, so makes sense. It's like Skyrim. Make as much money off it you can. In recent years, the press and LGBTQ groups have been putting pressure on Rockstar Games to remove or change content they see as transphobic. Some changes have been made in this remaster, such as a hot pink clad Captain Space toy figure, no longer present with its label of a interchangeable genitalia on the box cover. I saw these pictures as well. They've removed some more of the caricatures of trans or drag queens outside the Cockatoos bar, which is, get it, cockatoo. But in director mode, it can still be accessed. So you have, these characters who, don't get me wrong, looking fabulous, what have you, but kind of a caricature of how a lot of people imagine, trans people look. And look, you could get into discourse on this for days and days. I wanted to talk a little bit. As I'm looking through this, there are things about this that I like and that I don't like. First of all, we have come a really long way socially with regards to our understanding and acceptance of trans people since GTA 5 released. When did it release? Like two, 2015 or 16? I mean, it was a while ago, wasn't it? Time moves quickly now with these issues. So it is normal that over, any length of time, you would get these changes in perspective. Now, the stuff shown here, let me try to break this down in a very matter of fact way, if possible. So, point number one, there is nothing wrong with developers, publishers, just anyone who makes media changing their representation of a marginalized group as the social perspective of that group changes. Part of this is an ethical thing, as a social issue becomes more recognized, it's prudent to shift your position along with it. It's possible people at Rockstar Games have shifted their perspective to an extent. Additionally, as a business, they are concerned first and foremost with making money, and one of the ways they do that is by capitulating to social interests. That's not the woke mob. That's how selling things works. If you want to make a game or a TV show or anything, you capitulate to people's interests. That's how you make it marketable. They have entire marketing teams. They have whole divisions of people who get paid collectively millions to help shape their products to make sure it matches the interests of their consumer base. There's nothing wrong with that. At the same time, I will admit I don't really like changing this with the update for a few reasons. First of all, I'm iffy on sort of whitewashing existing media to remove its problematic elements. If you want to make something new and make the new thing less problematic, that's fine. But I take the stance here that, I don't know, the Disney or the Warner Brothers have with their old cartoons. Problematic stuff exists, but sometimes erasing it is to sort of ignore that it ever was present at all. And GTA 5, I think, is a pretty strong cultural artifact and some elements of historical perspective of trans people. I just feel weird about that sometimes. Like, oh, here, we're re-releasing all this media and we've, scrubbed it clean of all the problematic bits. Well, it's like, okay. I mean, okay, I get it. I understand, but it just seems odd. I don't know if I like that retrospective. I prefer media being kept, I think, in its original state. And I know the older versions of the game still exist that many people have played, but I just have weird feelings about that. Additionally, I wonder about the content that's being removed as well. Don't get me wrong. There's stuff like this and like the you know this definitely at the very least you could say it has transphobic undertones. But I think even if it's messy, I do feel like there's a sort of limited range of acceptable satire that you have to allow for some leeway with, especially with regards to games like GTA 5 or any of these. Like, is the satire great? Well, in my experience with the GTA games, not it's not phenomenal satire. I mean, we're not talking like 5 stars, like high quality stuff here in terms of you know the depth of its critique of modern society. But there does have to be some room. Altogether, I'm neutral on this. I mean, I feel a bit weird about the retrospective wipe away, but I also feel weird about the idea that Rockstar should be expected to preserve that if they feel it would be more prudent to remove it. And it's a good thing that a lot of these. I hope I don't have to go into a bit about why stuff like this can be transphobic, because I have a cough and I just don't want to add more time to me talking or I'm going to cough. So, I hope you get it. Anyway, like I said, I saw this while browsing Reddit, and there were some comments here, I think, that illustrated the thing that I actually do have a problem with. See, the decision from Rockstar itself, whatever, it's not a big deal. I don't really. The fan reaction, though, or at least the political reaction, stuff like this. Shooting people in the face is fine, though. Seriously, this shit is going to be on a joke. But it's such a patently stupid thing to type out, like it's as though like in a video game, like in a M-rated video game, I mean, shooting people in the face is the gameplay loop. That's not necessarily prejudiced or bigoted. I don't think they understand. Making this argument is like an explicit acknowledgement that you agree with like Jack Thompson types. Was he the name of the guy who went to Congress to try to ban video games? Was that Jack Dorsey? Oh God. Oh, I don't remember anything. It's 2 a.m. Listen, if you're making the reason why bigotry in media, like bigoted media, not a bigoted character, but when the media itself is presenting bigoted opinions or tropes, is problematic, is because those tropes and those beliefs are ingrained in the audience. To say stuff like this is to imply that shooting games instill in the audience a desire to shoot people, which is something that I don't believe. And look at this again. So we can murder innocent people, endorse crimes, drug use, be racist, but Lord have mercy, there was transphobic content in the game, holy fuck wonder of go repair, and release something without being afraid of being canceled over nothingness. They did release GTA 5, and it was like the most popular game ever. So okay. This stuff like this is really dumb. Rockstar is well, it's a rock star of a company, but tish. Yeah, the idea that they're like fearfully cowering from the mob. No, this is just the marketing execs who are capitulating to public demand, because that is how you make money in industries where you have to sell your products to people in a it's called a supply demand, exchange. It's how the whole process works. Remember when Rockstar used to be controversial? I think it still is. I don't know. I mean, people like what they like, I suppose. Anyway, stuff like this is really, really dumb. This is the kind of thing that you see a lot when discourse like this pops up. It's the equivocation of problematic media with media in which problematic things happen. You know, I mean, does anyone put a bit of critical thought to it? Go back 100 years to minstrel shows. Minstrelry. Like white people would put on blackface and do like a dance, and the dance would be about how black people are dumb or whatever. I mean, go back. It's like, well, why? All all they're doing there is a song and dance. Maybe it's racist, sure, but how can Terminator 2 still be on the air? People die there. Isn't murder worse than being racist? Which is really, really silly. There's a pretty big difference, I think, between the normalization of problematic tropes in media versus problematic stuff happening in media. which is why in retrospect people don't mind films like well, Django Unchained, or to go back a little bit further, Blazing Saddles. There's plenty of racism in those movies. The movies themselves are definitely not endorsements of that racism either. But nor is Django Unchained, for all of its, violence, an endorsement of just like randomly shooting people. Maybe shooting slave owners, I guess. But if you if you want, go for it. I won't stop you. It's just very stupid. The arguments here, it's one or the other. Either they sincerely believe that a game in which you shoot people is instilling in its audience, in its player base, a desire to shoot people, or they're arguing that it's not possible for media with problematic tropes to instill in its audience a belief in those problematic tropes. Neither of these positions are tenable. There's clearly a difference between these things. I think you can argue that there's media that endorses like drug use, like kind of glorifies it, but I think that there's a pretty strong distinction to be made between the artistic value of media which engages with or endorses a hedonistic perspective, and media which like endorses or implicitly supports stuff like racism or transphobia, in that the former is not like dying of a heroin overdose at the very least, but the perspectives that can be, sort of channeled through that mindset are of artistic worth. But I don't think there's really any artistic worth to art produced through the framework of a marginalized group being inherently inferior. I don't think it carries with it the same, I guess, communicative value. It's purely a detriment. There's some interesting conversation to be had there, but anyway, all this is meaningless. We're talking about Rockstar re-releasing their game for the umpteenth time, like 8 years after the fact, and removing just some little stuff. What other nonsense do we have here? I just want to say, as an LGBT player of GTA games, these people do not represent me. Oh, God. If you can't handle a video game, take the piss doing a stereotype, you're really going to be unprepared for the actual real world. This has always been kind of a stupid argument as well. People in the actual real world have, for centuries, argued against bigoted depictions of their marginalized group in media. You can go back, I mean, to the end of the slave days. I mean, even further back, there were artistic movements back in the 19th century which challenged the like pre-existing like bias towards only painting nobility and the aristocracy by painting like peasantry, and that was sort of an implicit critique of classism in the higher arts. And then you go like further along, and there have been critiques against like problematic elements of media like forever and ever, and that's real activism. Media, whether it be paintings or old movies or Rockstar games, is an incredibly powerful tool for instilling values in people. Now, conservatives, I'm not saying these people are all conservatives. My guess is like half 15-year-olds and half like edgy gamer bro, Gamergate types, whatever. But conservatives are often adamant in their belief that media can instill virtue when it's convenient for them. They'll talk on and on and on about how good media instills virtue and so on. But then when it's like, oh, well, do you believe then that bigoted media can instill vice? And they're like, what? No. What? No. 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 No way. That's not a consequence of my belief system I'm willing to bite the bullet on. I do agree with this comment though, because I don't like the revisionist element of the edit. So someone's never heard of Satire. This game is literally a reflection of today's chaotic society. This is this is the reason why I don't like the satire in Grand Theft Auto games. Because unfortunately, this actually is, I think, the level of depth the satire gets for the most part. It's a it's a reflection of how twisted society. It's like the meme, right? It's the Joker meme. It's very undirected. It's just sort of like a general like South Park approach. Except South Park episodes tend to be quite clever in spite of my problems with them. But a lot of like the the satirical experience is just wandering around and then getting a guffaw at some like I wouldn't say SNL level. No, just some pithy, snipe at some pop culture reference or some element of modern society that people are generally familiar with, and it's like, oh, well, how 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 edgy and incisive you are. This is true. Nobody, like, in reality, like, the removed content is not going to affect the actual quality of the game or the playthrough experience at all. You know. Let's see. Let's sanitize negative character traits from Grand Theft Auto. GTA 6 gonna have no teeth. I think that you can make edgy, controversial stuff without ever making it actually bigoted. I would defer again to Blazing Saddles. If people want to talk about, oh, they would never do this today. Well, they won't make Blazing Saddles today because they already made Blazing Saddles. But if you want, if GTA 6 wants to be like, it wants to really lean into like the edge, I mean, you can do that without being problematic. Now, mind you, people will still get mad at you, but that is the consequence of being controversial. People want to be controversial, but then they don't want to be like, you know, like criticized for it. I don't get it. That's the point of being controversial, isn't it? I mean, you're going to attract some derision. That was a character who was by most accounts an asshole. Do villains have to be nice to play in the future? Again, villains can murder, steal, whatever else villains do, but they can't say anything mean about trans people. This is kind of a repeat of the sentiment that I saw earliest in the thread. It really, really depends. If a character who's a villain is bigoted and the narrative criticizes them for their bigotry, like, to use a prior example, Django Unchained, the main villain, well, there are a couple of main villains, but Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a racist, and he is criticized for it, to put that lightly and euphemistically. He's thoroughly criticized through the heart for it. If you have a villain who's bigoted in a manner which isn't really commented upon, I think it's kind of a toss up depending on how it's handled. Like, if you have a villain who is definitely the bad guy and is racist, sort of casually, and the racism isn't much commented upon, but it's kind of contextually understood to be an element of their badness, I think that's perfectly fine. I think that can be brilliant. Even if it's not, I mean, there are ways to pull it off. I guess the issue often is that with the way villains are framed, you'll have a villain in an edgy satire game, and they'll be, let's say, transphobic, and the transphobia isn't something they're punished for. It's not even something that's kind of an element of their villainy or of their negative character traits. Oftentimes what you'll see is it's like the villain will be bad and then they'll do some bigoted thing and people be like, woo, yeah, because a lot of people like villains, don't they? I mean, there are tons of relatable villains in media and lots of villains that people root for. I don't think just because a trait that I myself consider negative is slapped onto a villain, that means that the narrative is condemning that trait. It's complicated stuff. Look, a lot of the arguments here are super dumb. It's just not a big deal. There's a lot of really nuanced stuff that you can say about media and how and how you can like responsibly handle subjects like this. And if you don't like the idea of responsibly handling subjects, that's fine. You have a legal right to make media where you irresponsibly handle it. But you will get criticism, and that criticism can lead to public backlash. And if Rockstar has decided that they would rather avoid that, or avoid the perceived threat of it, that's kind of not just their right, but also just like a good way to handle a business. Anyway, transphobia is bad, and GTA games are good. They're good. They're good games. Bye.